Everybody, we're gonna start here in just a matter of seconds. If you don't mind taking your seat, and we'll get started. All right, everybody, thank you all so much for being here. Purpose of our meeting today is to talk about our Renourishment project that's planned for this summer, and really specifically focus on the easements that have been requested of all of the abutting property owners to that project. Have with us McQuillin, the city attorney, Stephen Traynum with CSE, the designer of the project and the manager of the project. I am Douglas Kerr, city administrator. Have Sean Kuster, deputy administrator, Joshua Ace, our public information officer, and then some help in the back with public safety and easement execution. So happy to be here. Happy to be here this evening with you. I am going to just give a very quick overview, and then I'm going to hand it over to our technical professionals, and they're going to run through some details of the project, also details of the easement. We are then going to have a quick, is there a way to, do we have a clicker? You have a clicker. We're going to have time for you all to ask questions of us about the project, about the easement, whatever questions you may have. We are capturing and streaming this video on YouTube. So if you have a question that you would like to ask for somebody else, please do so you can kind of get answers for questions for people that aren't here. You could also have this video as a reference going forward. 2 weeks from now, there's a detail that gets hazy. We hope to have this video available for you to reference going forward. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen. Stephen is going to, next. So at a very high level, this goes through the project. It is a project that involves moving 2.5 million cubic yards of sand. The estimated cost that we're estimating soft cost a bit. We do now have bids back, but the project is going to be in the realm of $22 million. It has been said many times before that this will be the city's largest ever capital investment. So there's a lot of attention clearly on the project and a lot of excitement about the project for good reason. It's a big project. It's a big deal. So we are very excited for it. But there's obviously a part of it that we need the community and the abutting property owners. We need the support of those property owners. So we have 140 different property owners that are abutting the project, and we will need to get easements executed for each of those projects to know that it can go forward. Again, that's our primary purpose to be here tonight. And our schedule has a deadline for having easements back to us on April 22nd. As we've mentioned, we have people here tonight that would be able to help you execute the easement if you're ready to do that. If you're not, that's quite okay, but we do need to have everybody's easement in hand by April 22nd. That information will then be relayed to City Council, and City Council is going to make a deliberation about a final award of this project contract at their council meeting on April 28th. So everything is kind of lining up for that April 28th council meeting. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen to go over what we can expect from the project itself.
Thank you. Again, my name is Stephen Traynum, president of Coastal Science and Engineering. Our company has been around since 1984, focusing solely on coastal erosion problems and solutions. We've done over 50 large-scale beach and ocean projects up and down the East Coast, very similar to this. I've been with the company about 20 years and been working at Isle of Palms that entire time. I think my first field trip to the coast to collect any data was coming down in 2007 and looking at the sandbags that were all over the east end of the island. And, next slide. Okay, great. So this project, in some ways, is very similar to prior projects completed at Isle of Palms. We did the first nourishment. Equipment, the staging on the beach, and how it looks, how the dune's built. There's photos of that back there, so I encourage you to check that out after the meeting. The work will be done with a cutter head dredge. That type of dredge has a continuous pipe that connects the dredge and the bar area to the beach, so that pipe will come on shore in the center of the fill areas, and then they will work north and south to complete the work. Next slide. Right now, the project includes removing any existing sandbags. The state permit for those bags requires that they be removed. So that would happen in concurrence with the project. In any areas that are currently still vulnerable to erosion, there's a handful of properties, including Ocean Club, where water's still getting up near the building. We would coordinate sandbag removal with construction to make sure that the building's protected. We're not going to remove all the sandbags well ahead of nourishment and leave that a structure vulnerable. In 2008, we actually had to build a berm around the sandbags, come back, remove the bags, and then come back and refill that void after the fact. I think it would be an easier operation this go around. Any areas lacking healthy dunes, we will build new dunes or supplement the dune sand that is there, working seaward of any existing stable kind of healthy vegetation. We are not looking to bury, healthy dune areas, vegetation, anything like that. We wouldn't be removing sand fence or vegetation or fencing or any other kind of landscaping infrastructure through this project. We essentially work from the existing escarpment line. If there's a cliff on the beach, we like to tie into that, or the landward point of the seaward point of our easement area. So when we're complete with the project, we have a natural looking dune system that maintains public access to the beach, and then you'll have a dry sand berm seaward of there. The berm, depending on where you're at in the project, right now is anywhere between 200 and 700 feet wide. 700 feet is one of the largest nourishment berms that happen anywhere on the East Coast. You go down to Louisiana where they're rebuilding entire islands, you may find some wider berms down there, but that's a very wide berm, and there's some places we may even be a little wider than that. After the project, we will be looking at vegetating the dune and trying to promote natural dune growth following the project. We will also strategically use sand fencing. We're really going to try to rely on the vegetation to promote the vertical dune growth. Sand fencing we'll use to really try to keep people off of the dune areas and on the public access points, trying to kind of direct them out onto the flat beach and keeping them away from the newly vegetated dune areas. Okay, next slide. A couple of photos of what the project will look like. Up on the top left, there's the steel pipe. That's the pipe that they use to extend the fill down the beach. So you'll see periods of time where that pipe is staged on the beach. Behind the pipe there, you see a couple of container boxes. Those are actually mobile offices that they drag down the beach over the fill area. And you can see those in the bottom left photo when they're on the newly established berm. On the top right, you see a Y valve where they spread pipe into multiple areas where they can fill. That allows them to fill one part of the beach while they're extending the pipe on the other part, and then they'll flip and nourish one part while they're extending others. So they keep, that way they can keep the dredge operating 24/7 and not stop the dredge to have to move pipe around. In some places, you actually may see 4 stretches of pipe moving down the beach. As they're completing the project, they generally close off a section of the beach in the active construction zone. That area may be about 500 feet wide, maybe a little longer. But where the bulldozers are actually working and the water and sand are coming out of the pipe, they shut down access to the beach to allow that equipment to work safely. They move that area almost on a daily basis. As the project's being built, they may move 100 or 200 feet per day down the beach as they're completing these sections. So what tends to happen is they will close off about a 500-foot stretch of beach. They will continue to work and extend that closure area, and then they will stop and kind of catch the back end back up at one point. So you'll see it kind of stretch out and then caterpillar kind of down the beach, working, again, 100 to 200 feet per day. There will be mechanical shutdowns, there will be weather shutdowns, and a dredge schedule is very, very unpredictable. From the time they tell you that they're going to show up and start pumping, I would say probably add 3 weeks to that at the minimum, just from the history on every project that we've ever done. And then as they work, we can tell you what direction they're traveling, what sections of the beach have been finished, but it gets very hard to predict when the equipment will be in front of a particular house. We try to do the best we can to inform the public on that. We will provide weekly updates to the city that they will post on their website. These will include maps showing the active fill area, the areas of the beach to be completed, the areas of the beach that have been completed. In areas where they can, where the beach has a current dune or a dry sand area, they will try to maintain access where you can walk along the dune line to get from one side of the site to the other. And there's a lot of areas where they will be able to do that in the Wild Dunes area. Areas around like Beachwood East right now or the Ocean Club, they would have to shut down the entire beach, and you would have to find an alternate route to get from north to south across the project area. I think next slide. Just the type of equipment. This is a cutter head dredge on the left. Essentially, it's a barge with a big vacuum on the end of it that sinks down, or the cutter head goes down into the offshore bar area, 8 to 10 feet. That's how thick of a section of sand that they're digging. They'll pump that through the pipe. That slurry comes out at about 15 feet per second. It's a lot of water and material coming through. There's about 20,000 horsepower on these dredges. And then they will, it takes 10 to 15 minutes for the material to actually go from the dredge to the beach through that length of pipe. You see on the right, the single pipe that's kind of on the bottom right side of the image going. Okay.
If you don't, Joshua, if you could go back one slide. If you would just take a look at the photograph on the right side of the screen here, and part of the challenge in kind of talking through with people is the idea that in that photograph where that equipment is staged, that is technically private property. So what's generally the deeds on this island extend private property out to the mean high water mark. So that's an excellent photograph that shows that that project and that equipment, those pipes, those are all on private property at that point. And that really is the conundrum that requires that we get these easements. So when you're thinking through the easement and what you're releasing, just have it in your mind's eye that we're really talking about that part of your property that is out in what we kind of think of as the public beach, and it is public beach. The public trust doctrine requires that is publicly accessible beach, but our deeds extend those properties, or your deeds really extend those properties out to mean high water.
Can you point to what you consider the mean height?
And and Mac may get more into this during his part of the presentation, but this is an excellent example of, for this property that has now been renourished, the mean high water line is way out here. You can see where it goes from kind of
And that's a
dry.
high tide?
It's the mean high tide, so the average of all those. So yeah, you're right, you could have a 6'8" king tide, or you could have a 5'4", or whatever it is, but it's the average of all those, and it's a dynamic sort of line in a sense.
Yeah, I think this is a legal gray area, and I hesitate to even get into it, but I think what the state would generally consider to be that area would be, some people would use like the line of stable vegetation, because the tide never really gets up over that. So basically the toe of the
That's
dune.
very different.
I understand. Or a line, I think the general idea is the line where if you walked out there on any normal weather day, tide day, where does the high tide swash line stop? From dry sand beach to, the wet sand beach. And that's an elevation of about +5 in AVD, depending on where you're at on outfalls.
Yeah, so again, this to me was a very good example that shows the challenge of working on.
I think I've mentioned most of all this before. We would expect a single parcel, whether it's a condo regime or a single house, to be impacted by that construction site for a period of 3 to 5 days to allow them to
Did you say
move.
24/7 for your comment?
24/7. They will work nonstop. They will not work on July 4th, we've been told. So that'll be one day of reprieve, but
So lighting at night again?
lighting at night, yes. They have, since the project will be done during sea turtle season, they have some very strict lighting requirements, and they will have monitors on site at night to make sure they adhere to that. Essentially, most of the lighting needs to be directed offshore and not up and down the beach, and so they will try to be doing that. They will have the biggest issue that we tend to run into is the backup alarms, which create a decent amount of noise. And if we turn the volume up on these videos back there, you can hear what that sounds like.
You said offshore, the lighting has to be offshore?
It needs to be directed offshore, meaning the light plants would be up near the dune area pointed towards the ocean. So that if you're looking up and down the beach, you wouldn't see them as much, but you will see lights. It's unavoidable that you will see some of the lighting for the site.
There's no
Do
way
you want to ask some questions?
Yeah. We do have a whole section of the agenda dedicated to questions, so if you don't mind, we'll get through Stephen, then Mac, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yes, thank you. I would love to stop and answer that. Again, if work does shut down for weather or mechanical delays, what they would generally try to do is reduce their footprint to the minimum amount possible, open up as much of the beach as possible, but sometimes those delays are a day or two, sometimes they may be a week or two, depending on what's going on. All right, next slide. So a couple of things to look at are that we would expect to see. We will not be working under decks, patios, porches, or any erosion control structures or houses, basically any structure. Their equipment will stay away from those structures. And generally what would happen is they would take their dozers, push sand to the point where sand starts to fall under like if it's a dune walkover, where it starts to kind of fall under the post of the dune walkover, and then they stop because they don't want to damage any of those structures. That may leave a void of sand under there that an owner may want to fill in, but we don't want to risk damage to the structures and have that on the contractor's liability. We will be working up to the point where you have a vegetated dune in areas that we can, or there's an existing escarpment, or to wherever the easement line allows us to work. There are a couple of places along the south end, especially where the easement line is further out on the beach. So there may be a gap between where our work would stop and the existing dune or escarpment line. I think I mentioned the rest of that. So next slide, please. And this is one example of an easement. It's kind of difficult to see at this scale and from this room, but it shows the hatched area with the state setback line in the red, which was the landward limit of our easement line. As you go further north, the setback line gets into the dune field, and so then we stopped our easement line just inside the dune field, and we put it in the vegetation a little bit in those areas for one main reason, and that is if we have a storm event that occurs between now and construction and you lose 10 or 15 or 20 feet of dune, we want to have the ability to rebuild that dune for you. So we wanted to move that easement line as far landward as we could in those areas because we want to be able to get you back to where you were. So if you see a hatched area that covers any vegetation right now, if that vegetation is there when we go to build the project, we're not going to bury existing dunes or vegetation. We would work out seaward of that point. But the easement, we want, for your own interest, as much flexibility as possible there. I think that's the end of my slides. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
I'm Mac McQuillin, I'm the city attorney, and I got to turn my mic on. I get the exciting topic of beach renourishment easements. And I remember you from the last time we had this back in 2023. I see my law professor, Alan Medlin. A lot of folks that were here, and this is not your first rodeo with the easements, so some of this will be repeats from the last time. The first big question is why do we need beach renourishment easements? Douglas went into this with that last image. If you go to the next slide. So you can see this is the image in this slide is from one of backyard. So that's why this is needed, is because some of the sand will be placed on private property. This is unlike the last project though, where we were literally like scraping sand up into people's yards where the erosion occurred. And so this is a little different in terms of the easement area. But that's why an easement's needed. All of the work though that will take place is going to either take place seaward of the state jurisdictional line, which is the red line is depicted in the image, or where the existing erosional scarp is located. And that was in y'all's cover letter. We did, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so we did get some feedback from residents that they would like that language in the easement too, and so we prepared an addendum that includes that language to clarify exactly where the easement area is. But each of your easements will have an individualized exhibit with a hash mark showing exactly where the proposed work zone will be located. One of the big questions last time was whether we were going to do a permanent or temporary easement. And, we've opted, like we did last time, to go for a 2-year temporary easement. The city would prefer, obviously, that we have permanent easement so that we don't have to get these signed and executed every time and can act quickly in the event of a storm event or an erosion event. But we opted to ultimately, go 2 years, which is exactly what we did, last time. So I want to get into sort of an explanation now of some of the various easement terms, common questions we've got, et cetera, on this. The big thing is the language of this easement is very similar to the language we used last time. Next slide. Yeah, so again, this is language that was based off of the Army Corps' easement, other easements that municipalities have used, and this went through both last time and this time, numerous rounds of revisions from, property owner feedback and their attorney's feedback as well. And I think we've got a good product here that makes sense. As I mentioned, after the easement was circulated, we got additional feedback this time from owners, and the city has made several important revisions in an addendum. My understanding is that addendum has been emailed out to all of the affected property owners. We also have copies here with notaries, and so if you've already turned in your easement and signed it and had it notarized and sent it to the city, many people have, you can sign the addendum here and have it fully executed here as well. So first big piece of feedback and change that we made is because the easement area or easement location area is not near as close as it was to houses last time in terms of the scraping. We've received some feedback that the removal of boardwalks and pilings and sand fencing and turf and debris located in the easement area needed to be removed by the owner. We've struck that entire paragraph from this easement because that will not affect the scope of work for this particular project. So we received a lot of concerns about this to the extent people had things in their backyard. Obviously, as all of you probably know, there's a seawall on the beach too. We received feedback from that owner as well. So that provision was taken out. The next slide is in what's called the addendum clause, the end of the easement. It originally read at the beginning to have and to hold all and singular the easement before mentioned under the city, its successors and assigns forever. And we received feedback from several folks, look, if this is a temporary easement, why are you putting the word forever in there? And so we added to each of these sentences in the addendum clause that it's in accordance with the terms of the easement. So the only thing that doesn't expire after 2 years in this easement is the release language. And the reason for that is the city can, and its engineers, we can't guarantee that this is gonna stop Mother Nature. And so we can't guarantee that this work is gonna prevent erosion in perpetuity, and so that release survives the 2-year period of easement. But other than that, this is a 2-year temporary easement. Next slide, again, which I discussed this earlier, but this language was contained in the cover letter that went to all the property owners, but it was not in the easement. And so we made sure to include it just for clarity that the easement area and the work will take place seaward of the state jurisdictional line, which is the red line in the exhibit to either easement or the erosional start, whichever is further seaward. Signing requirements, this is important. Last time we got a bunch of easements back that we had to send back to the owners to get fixed because it either wasn't witnessed or wasn't notarized. So if you haven't executed, we have folks here today and we can make sure that it's done right. If you have already done it and it's wrong, we'll be sure to tell you. But if you haven't, make sure that the property owner or owner signed. You gotta have 2 separate witnesses. It has to be signed in the presence of a notary. It needs to have the notary's signature and stamp on it. And we will need an original. So the scanned copy, email is not sufficient. We need the original because it will be recorded in the Register of Deeds office. And the city and or my firm, if anyone has questions about it, we're happy to, like if you're filling it out and need to know what to do, you can reach out to the city and we can help you there. All right, common questions about easement. So one of the questions we got both this time and last time is an easement an encumbrance? Yes, all easements are encumbrances on property. Most properties have easements, whether that's a utility easement, an access easement, The easement, in our view, is much like a utility easement. It doesn't burden the property, but it does benefit the property by providing protection from storms and resulting erosion. Next question, does an easement affect title of property? Yes, it does, just like any other encumbrance. So also like a utility easement, the easement should have no impact on your market value of your property. In fact, if your property is protected from erosion and washing the ocean, it's probably going to be worth more. Can a property owner use the property subject to the easement? Yes. So the easement specifically has language that reserves to the grantors, the property owner, and their successors, and assigns all rights and privileges to use the easement property so long as such uses do not interfere with the purpose of the easement. Property owners are also specifically permitted to construct overwalk structures subject to state and local regulations. Next question was, does the easement affect the title to any property that may accrete in the future? We've gotten this question a lot last time and this time. This easement does not. By its terms, the easement does not affect ownership rights to any property located seaward of the lots encumbered by the easement. If accretion does occur in the future, naturally the property owner may claim title to that accreted property, but that claim may be contested by the state that nothing in this easement is intended to prevent any party from claiming ownership, and the easement expressly states that. So this easement is not going to take or give any property. That's going to ultimately be up to what the law says and what the state says. And then finally, and most importantly, the deadline for both the easement and the addendum is April 22nd. If you turned in the original easement, which like I said, many folks have, and you want to sign the addendum, which will also be recorded with the original easement, that needs to be provided to the city by the 22nd. Because the point is if you sign an easement, but we don't get the addendum before the 22nd, just the easement will be recorded. So it's important that if you want this additional terms to apply, you turn in those documents by the 22nd. That's all we got.
So, you want to speak to it? Yes, Stephen's going to speak quickly to the jurisdictional line review, which is coming up, and Mac touched on it a bit. After that, I would just ask that if you do have a question, that you speak into the microphone. That's the only way that the question gets into YouTube. So anybody watching it, if you don't speak into the microphone, the question would be lost. So if you would, just stand up, speak into the microphone, and we'll have question and answer. But
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
I just want to speak real quickly on the state's status of their jurisdictional line review every 10 years. And I'm not speaking for the state in this, just kind of giving my opinion on what's likely to happen soon. But they are scheduled to update the jurisdictional lines for Isle of Palms. They were anticipating this spring or summer of 26. I think they're running a little behind schedule. They will be certainly reaching out for public hearings and notices on the draft line review that they do. But nothing with this project, by placing sand, is going to affect where they place these lines. They've already collected the data and the surveys that they need, or that they're going to be using to determine where they're going to issue these draft lines at. If you're unfamiliar with that process, along the inlet zones, which the state defines and you can look at on their website, they set the baseline at the position of the most landward shoreline over the past 40 years. So they will look at all the surveys, 40 years. 40. Yeah. So they will look at the beach condition from aerial imagery and surveys they've conducted with GPSs to see where was the shoreline, which would be the high tide line, at any point over the last 40 years, and place the baseline there. This is at the inlet zones. And then the setback distance is determined by the erosion rate at local transects. So every 100 feet or so, they determine what is the erosion rate based off of shoreline analysis, and they will include a multiplier of 40 times. So if your beach is losing 2 feet per year over that interval, then 40 times that is 80 feet, and that setback line will be placed 80 feet landward of that baseline. So I imagine at the very south end, we're going to see some landward shifting of those lines when the state proposes those. Along the center part of the island, away from the inlets, they look at where's the primary dune located at. And most of that condition, or most of that area, the dune's actually grown over the past 10 years. but the state's not going to move the lines further seaward, so I imagine that they're going to stay pretty consistent. As you get to the Wild Dunes area, those lines were already pretty far back, and the shoreline has not been further landward than it has been previously, so I don't think you're going to see a lot of change in that area either. I just wanted to point out and make very clear that whether we did the nourishment or don't do the nourishment, or where we place sand, and that is not really going to affect what the state does with determining where those lines go. I imagine there's going to be a lot of discussion about those lines once the state kind of issues their draft and has the public hearing.
So questions, if you don't mind, if you just come up, speak to the microphone. I don't know if just tap it, be sure it's on before you speak, if battery
Okay.
dies.
Okay. So I'm at 900 Ocean Boulevard, and when I'm at the top looking down, when it's a higher, like king tide or a little bit higher than normal or big waves, about the windjammer area to the pier, the waves and the water's coming up over the berm. There's like a tide pool. There's like a couple of tide pools, but there's one way back now. And every time the water gets in there, it's now running down all the way down the beach to like 6th or something. And it's like deep. You guys have been out there, I'm assuming. So I'm wondering, when they do the replenishment, do they plan on filling that in a little bit? Because that would be key, because right now, like every time there's any kind of waves or high king tide or anything, that's just kind of eroding a line, not even in the middle of the beach, like closer to like the houses, and like a big chunk of the beach is just going to get separated. But if we fill that in, that'd be amazing. Is that part of the plan? Just curious.
That would be part of the plan. So fortunately, those are there because you're getting a lot of natural accretion from the north that's kind of moved through the pier, and you're getting these ridge and runnel systems that are migrating up the beach. And it's so much sand that it kind of builds a little island past the dune, and it takes big tides to overtop that and push it up to the dune. But this project would fill in those areas, certainly.
That'd be awesome.
They
Okay.
may not be there by June or July or whenever we get there.
Knock on wood.
But
Like, I'm hoping I feel like the wind has stopped in the last year or so, because when the windy days, all that sand blows up, and we just haven't had as much of that. There's been a lot of not, coming from the ocean in as much. So I just noticed it hasn't been building as much in the last year or so. So that helps too.
I like less light wind because that's small waves. That's
Yeah.
good for keeping sand on beaches.
Okay.
Not great
All right.
for
Thank you, guys.
Just gonna jump in on the easement. First of all, thank you. I'm at 130 Ocean Boulevard, Cindy Solomon. I haven't seen the addendum, but from what you're showing, that was a good positive. Thank you. I did have one question though, Mac, and for you and David, which is the hold harmless part. I struggle with there not being some exception for negligence, or at least gross negligence regarding the contractor. Personal injury is a big deal.
We struck, that was in the easement that y'all signed before. There is no hold harmless language in this easement. The only-
So, okay, go ahead.
this has the release language, but not the indemnity and hold harmless language.
All right, so it's releasing the city, but it's not, I understand, it's not releasing the contractor if there was an issue, say a bulldozer runs over a child, or in your property, a bulldozer just, I don't know, hits something and the bulldozer driver's hurt. I mean, I just want to make sure that on our property, as we've defined it here, that this doesn't create something that excludes gross negligence for sure.
Yeah,
And I think the city wouldn't want that either for themselves or itself.
I'm looking at so the language that was in here that we struck, and primarily due to Alan Bedlam, my law professor's comment, was that grantor hereby agree and hold harmless and indemnify the city, its officials, inspectors, advisors, and contractors from any and all loss or damage, including attorney's fees, incurred as a result of any claims against the city or its officials, agents, employees, inspectors, or advisors for personal injury or property damage in connection with the city's work contemplated here, and except to the extent such loss is caused by any negligent, reckless act of the city, its officials, agents, employees, inspectors, or advisors. We struck that entire paragraph.
We struck part of it, but we still have, ours says grantor hereby releases the city and its officials. We don't have all the hold harmless language, but it's still in effect, seems to suggest we're releasing them. And again, we can talk offline, but I do still have a concern about that paragraph. And I'm greatly appreciative of everything else for sure, and your willingness to work with us on this. But again, for the city's sake and my own, I just want to make sure that there aren't repercussions in the event of gross negligence, particularly in negligence as well. I'm not looking for anything regarding Mother Nature for sure. But, if that driver's, been awake 24/7 and there's a real issue, I don't feel that we should, release that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
I agree with Cindy. That was a concern of mine because I saw negligence this whole summer by the Army Corps, and I was very concerned when I saw little kids, the rate of speed that some of the truck drivers were driving down. So I think it's a concern because, as you say, we're the property owner all the way out to the mean high water mark. So that language needs to be repaired in the lease, because if a truck driver is asleep, like she says, a dozer driver, isn't seen all the way around, it certainly releases you as a city, but it doesn't release me as a homeowner. So there has to be some protection in that for us as a homeowner. And my other question is to Steve. I was here in 2018, Steve, and I have pictures of no sand in front of my house and no dune bait. But when I called the city administrator, who was Linda Tucker at the time, and the mayor, the response I got was the sand was allocated for our end of the ocean, but it all went to wild dunes. And in your talking about all the measurements of how much sand is going to go to that end of the island versus our end of the island, how do I know you're not going to get all the appropriate sand, which happened in our time in 2018? The amount of appropriate beach sand that was compatible was used up, and it went to wild dunes, and there was no more for our end of the ocean. And also, through the FOIA requests, I found out that you mentioned again tonight sand fencing and plantings. That never happened on our end, but plants were put in. Desiree pointed it out when Matt Slagle was there, because that's a state requirement. And it happened in wild dunes, and I have letters requesting, could we get together, volunteer, get small plugs, plant it. It never happened on our end. So what assurance do I have that this sand fencing or planting is going to happen on the whole beach, not just a particular part of the beach?
Okay. So back in 2018, following Hurricanes Matthew and Irma in 2016 and 17, we had a lot of dune recession at the south
I
end,
know, yeah.
And the city, we were able to get, I can't remember if it was a modified permit, but we added the south end as a potential spot for fill kind of at the last minute through that permitting process. The city never identified funding to actually include that in the project, and we saw a fair amount of beach recovery from 2017 to 2018, and there really wasn't money for it identified anyway. So we weren't just able to implement a project there. It wasn't that we ran out of sand and so we couldn't do it at the end. It's just there wasn't money identified at that time.
Oh, I have letters that tell me exactly what happened, because it was a grave concern. And I also found out that it was only through putting the sand in our end that the permit went through. So I don't want to debate that tonight, because that's a whole nother legal issue. I just want to get on record assurances from you that the appropriate sand is going to be allocated to our end, and there's not going to come up with no funding, or the appropriate beach sand is not available.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of sand available. It's been included in the bid that the council will consider on the 28th. It's up to council to decide if they want to place that sand there or not.
Yeah, because
we'll be recommending that
we had a concern at your meeting the last time that you put the numbers down for our end of the beach sand, and that was a grave concern to all of us that live on this end, why you would put that language in there, that the amount you reduced it.
Are you referring to the bid document? That
Yes, yes.
The reason why the bid document goes out at a lower value is because you're trying to make sure that when bids come back, they fall within the budget that the city had allocated. It wasn't that that was the project we were hoping to do. We just wanted the flexibility that should bids come in higher, we still have a valid project and we can award up to the permitted or budget allowable maximum.
So how did you calculate that this end would have less in the bid? How did you separate the two bids?
Well, we look at the existing condition of the beach, we look at the amount of sand that the Corps placed and what we were actually able to measure stayed on the beach with that Corps project, which was over 300,000 yards.
Because the sand didn't stay. I mean, it's in the inlet and it's in Sullivan's Island. It migrated and around to the,
I mean, I walked that shoreline today from the pier to the breach inlet. There's almost 200 feet of dry sand in front of the dune along that entire area. A lot of that sand.
Well, yeah, we haven't had significant king tides yet.
But we've been able to measure a lot of accretion. So that was part of the calculation in the bid structure. Again, we are recommending that they place the full 800,000 yards of sand there and potentially more, but that's something we're, still reviewing.
So is the bid lowering to make the bid come in financially at a certain budget number? Is that what your point is?
I would answer that the city had planned, our budget for the project was $32 million. City did not have $32 million, but that was what we thought the project probably would come in at. The thing we were guarding against is what if the bids came in, and it happens unfortunately with a lot of our projects, what if it came in at $50 million?
Mm-hmm.
If it came in at $50 million and we had to dial back the project, if we did not have a minimum bid amount, we would have to start that bid process all over again. We'd have to scrap the entire process, start from scratch, and go back to it. So it's just a safeguard in the event that your planning number is off and it goes the wrong way. It's way more expensive than what you had planned for. You still have the ability, because otherwise, if you don't have that amount, the bidders will just say, I'm not going to do the work because it's not worth our effort, and you'd have to restart the bid.
I understand that.
And I don't know that we've really talked about it here, but we have the good news of, I think, what could be the best bids that we've had, that I think that Stevens' firm, who does a lot of this work, has seen in 20 years. So it is the lowest cost for a project that we've seen in a very, very long time. I think lower than the 2018 cost, which is just unheard of for any other project that the city has done. So we have the luxury, I guess, of having a lot of room between what we were planning for and the actual bids. I hope it would be an easy decision for City Council to go with the absolute maximum permitted. My expectation is that would be an amount that they could comfortably do.
So that was a bid maximum and minimum, not
it's a permit maximum.
A permit maximum.
Bid minimum.
Bid minimum, okay.
So those are kind of the floor and the ceiling that we're having to work between.
So it wasn't lowering the amount you were putting on for the permit. It was lowering for the financial bid.
That's correct. And
Okay.
it was to safeguard, again, in the event that we plan for 32, we get bids back that what we want to do is 50, and we just can't make that happen, can't pull together the money, we would still have a viable project.
That's
Wouldn't be
my,
what we wanted,
okay.
but it would be viable, and we could do something, because unfortunately, generally when the city goes out to bid, things come back more often than not higher than we had planned instead of lower. So
I understand that. Back to Steve about the sand fencing and the vegetation. Is that in the bids? You mentioned you're going to do that. Who's going to do it? And is the funds already there to do that? Or is it going to be the whole ocean front? Or how are you planning that?
So I believe the city has at least $75,000 set aside for sand fencing and vegetation. We would include that, again, focusing heavy on the vegetation part of it is our recommendation. Sand fence works really well, but they both accomplish growing dunes, and, you know, the issue with sand fence is it turns into debris during storms.
Yeah.
But
it
those
works,
projects-
it works for building dune because
Yeah,
after we had those, we were one of only 2 people that put up sand fencing and vegetation, and it just grew.
it works really well.
Absolutely works. And also just putting plugs in. I know Polly's Island and other islands got their city together and volunteered to plant I tried to get the city here to do that. Just let us volunteer to plant the plugs, you know, which aren't that expensive, and get the whole coastline done with vegetation like that, and a volunteer basis to help plant it, you know, it's our property, so we don't need city permits to plant. That worked really well in other areas.
Again, we will be working with the city to put out a bid or a request for quotes from the groups that specialize in that. There's a handful of companies that's what they do. And that would happen, you know, immediately following the project, as long as it's a suitable
Well,
time of
heads
year.
up, last year all their plantings died because of a storm that they had come in the south. So plugs weren't even available because I know I tried to get them. They weren't available. So they're not always available if the weather freezes in certain areas and that. But my question still was, who's going to determine where that's going to happen? If it's $75,000, it's not that much for all of that. So how is the city going to determine who's going to get the plantings or where you're going to put the plantings?
Yeah. Well, we would map out the alternatives as far as if you want to cover X number of feet, and with the density and width of, you know, different scenarios. Generally, they're 18 inches or 24 inches apart. You can plant the crest of the dune, the slope of the dune, and even out a little bit in front. So we would present them a couple of different options, and then it would be up to them to decide how much they wanted to fund.
So the city controls that, not you. You're just making recommendations, but the city council has to approve the budget and where it's going to go.
Yeah, it'll be a separate bidding process, separate project, but it is in our plans to do.
Because I know the state requires it. They require the
don't
plantings.
require it.
It's in the legal from the state. The other thing I was wondering about, do you have a paper where we as homeowners can read where the budget is coming and how it's allocated and where it's coming from? You kind of state what it is, but like some coming from ATEC, some is coming from the city. Like we can actually go in and see where the funding's coming from, the 22 million that you're talking about.
Yes, it just so happens council held a budget workshop maybe yesterday. Was it yesterday? So
Okay.
this is in their discussions right now for the upcoming budget. This is probably too much detail for the room.
Right.
But these new bids, if the city were to do the maximum amount of the project permitted, and use all of our beach preservation funds, deplete those down to a minimum amount of leaving $2 million in that fund, along with the Wild Dunes contribution. We do have a grant from the state right now for about $1.5 million. That leaves about a $3 million gap still. That $3 million gap would be split between state municipal accommodations tax and city municipal accommodations tax evenly. That's the staff's proposal to council. That decision would actually be made as part of the budget process, which happens to be going on all at the same time. So that's the plan, is to fund that gap through those existing funds.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to follow up on one question that was asked just a second ago on the gross negligence. I don't disagree at all with that. I just wanted to point out that this project it looks a lot different than the trucking projects or the scraping projects or even what the Corps did. They put up construction fencing on either side of the active construction area, and they usually have people stationed at each end of that fencing to keep public from coming into the active worked area. So it is a much more controlled construction environment. Of course, that does not eliminate all risk or anything, but it's a much different looking project. So I just wanted to mention that.
To piggyback on that too, this release language was shared with the contractors, and given that they're like the last project we did, there were multiple lawsuits by homeowners, so they're obviously on guard. And so this was language that was specific, it was in the last easement, but it was, they said, do not take this out of this easement. I think it will be difficult for the city to find folks willing to work, given that 15 plus homeowners filed lawsuits against the city and others based on the last project.
No, and I completely understand that there's a give and take with all of this. It's just, and that's why I kept at least trying to say at least gross negligence. I don't think anyone should be released from gross negligence. That is a very high bar, as you know, but it is a bar. So, I mean, I just think that the city and the individuals should be aware of that, because so much of it is out of our control. I promise you, I'm not looking for, I'm just looking for that protection in that rare case that, because this is all beyond our ability. We're not involved with who's hired. We don't know their schedule. We don't know, we don't know if our neighbor has a small child that showed up yesterday that's never been here before, that extra eyes need to be on her. And, that's all that I'm trying to is ask you to look at that from that standpoint. I want this project done badly. Okay, but there's just a point where you have to kind of at least express that there's a line I think we really need to be looking at that gross negligence. That's all. Willful you know the words.
Yeah.
And thank you. And I recognize the difficulties with that. It's kind of, it was put in when we were building walls, you all wanted something we couldn't give you, which was an engineer that would say with 100% certainty that a wall could be built and there would never be damage to our neighbors. And it could never be signed. It was in effect, it was an ordinance that wasn't ever employed because of that. So language does mean a lot, and I recognize you're correct. It's hard to find a contractor who's going to agree to that if they've been sued 15 times. On the other hand, we also need to look out for the interests of ourselves, at least of the compromise, and maybe the gross negligence would be the compromise. Thank you, and thank you for adding that information in.
When you're right on top of it and watching it 24/7, you get a view that, when you only walk the beach one day or 2 days or 5 times, the comment about equipment when it's broken and they stop using it, that, at least with the Army Corps of Engineers, did not happen. There were times where they were using equipment that they shouldn't have been using because it was broken, but yet, because of the noise and maybe their deadlines, they continued to use it, and it was so obtrusive. I mean, our houses were shaking, and it was, you could see on the 4th day when they finally fixed it that they realized they had a problem. But when you're in a situation like that, what does the homeowner do? Am I supposed to call you?
Yes. Yeah, and we do take those phone calls. Some of them we can deal with. We can certainly relay it to the contractor. We've received these complaints. And generally, I will say they're agreeable to making modifications if they can, and sometimes they just can't. But yes, if you have a concern or a problem with an active part of the project, call us, let us know. We will definitely reach out to the contractor and to the team.
Well, and it sounds like there's going to be a big difference between what the Army Corps was doing and what this new team will be doing, because there was a lot of danger towards the end, especially when the beaches started filling with kids, and they were climbing on the pipes even where the dredge was coming out. I mean, and I saw people getting dangerously close to that effluent that could kill someone. And I was shocked because there's only one person to even stop, so many. And just an aside, I've grown a lot of grass on the dune. If it doesn't get watered, and if we have a drought, that $75,000 you're going to spend is just going to die. I mean, it has to be watered. And so the individuals that are in their dune or in their space, they have to maintain it, or it's not going to do it unless we're having a lot of rain. But without watering, you can plant everything you want, and it's not going to live.
I'd like to address the plants for you. The city doesn't state what kind of plants DES says, And the only acceptable plants that they allow, you can go in their website and find it, they don't need to be watered. So those grasses,
I put in large plants.
yeah, but see, if you do that, because they'll come and walk and let you know if you have the wrong plantings. I know we experienced it. So they have the certain plants that they allow and the seagrasses that they allow only on the dune, because that's under their purview, and they don't need to be watered. So to assure you, those kind will live, yeah.
I'm not putting in small plants, I'm putting in
Yeah.
large plants. and
Yeah. Well, we,
They've done fantastic.
yeah.
Ms. Vanderham, if we could have other questions, if anybody has them.
Hi there. First of all, thank you for your efforts. Everything's appreciated. I'm a island resident and homeowner on the backside island, but I also am a property manager for about 20 oceanfront homeowners. My question specifically to number 3 on the newly released addendum, and how that relates to the 8 or 9 properties that were talked about in the November meeting, council meeting, with how far those jurisdictional lines are out from the properties themselves. And what I'm reading here is, so all work on the easements will take place seaward of the jurisdictional lines. It seems contrary to what was discussed at that meeting, in that where those lines are almost in the water right now. So you're gonna build the dune out in the water, and we're leaving a gap between the water. Who's filling the gap?
Well, it depends on, some of it, if you look at, it's in one of my slides when I had the picture, but there was one, it shows like the line, the jurisdictional line. In one instance, it's further down the beach. Yeah, look, and then see as you go further down the beach towards the pier, it gets closer and is sort of in someone's backyard.
So-
But
So Steve, I understand the question, and you are correct, and it's a little bit weird, and we've talked through the issue of potentially, and that property actually shows it.
you
where-
get down to 108 and it's 80 feet.
80?
80.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So-
far from the house.
So we have, and just for the benefit of the room, I don't know that we really talked about this, but I think the break point is around 6th Avenue where it follows the dune line.
Yes.
And it's still all seaward of the jurisdictional line, but the dune line basically is the most controlling because it's farthest seaward. South of 6th, it is the OCRM setback line, which is the controlling line. For most of that project, south of 6th, it works out well.
Yes.
There's not much of a gap. It just so happens
It's
that,
almost the same thing.
yep, it
The
basically,
escarpment and the jurisdictional line.
we do have, and we've talked at council about this a number of times, there's a handful of properties, less than 10, right at the turn,
Yeah.
that do have this weird situation that we're gonna have to deal with, where we would be putting a berm potentially, that's well out from what's currently eroded beach.
It's in the water, right?
And we have talked with a handful of owners individually. They don't want that gap. They've indicated to us, we don't want a gap, we don't want a berm that's farther seaward and would be subject to washing away. They would like for us to fill that portion that is landward of the OCRM line and take it all the way to the escarpment. And I think the city is willing to do that. I think
Okay.
that's how we initially contemplated the project, but certain, there was concern about the process Stephen mentioned
Yeah.
of, in the future, there will be this jurisdictional line issue, and could this renourishment have an impact? So that was really created that way at the request of the owners. Again, we very much want the project to happen.
Yes.
So we're bending every which way we can to be able to get 100% signed easements, and
Sure.
that's an example of one of those. It will be a little weird for about 10 properties.
And it's getting confusing for people which are asking, and I'm not an attorney, I don't give legal advice, but I'm getting these questions and it's unclear. So would those people then would the legal advice from you to be not to sign the addendum so that you then can work landward of the jurisdictional lines and fill that gap? Because if they sign the addendum, you can't work in that area.
We would like to sign, we would like to fill the gap. And we would like to make contact with any owner who would like for us to fill the gap, and we will come to terms that would have us filling the gap and putting the berm in a place that's not going to be subject to eroding away, putting it back closer to the current escarpment.
So
and we've
So you're going to contact these people directly?
well, I would
So I don't
ask
have
that
to-
that you, because I do think you're
I've
right there
got
in
two
that
of them
term.
specifically
Yeah.
right there that it's probably $1 million gap worth of sand, right?
Yeah, so we would happily fill that gap. We
Okay.
just need to make those arrangements and we can do that.
My other question maybe for Stephen, can you clarify exactly where the unstabilized inlet zone starts in the south end?
We just looked at that. Is it all the way up to Sixth Avenue?
Sixth, yeah.
Sixth Avenue, I guess
So,
it's the boundary.
so from 6 down, the jurisdictional line change is different calculations than the inside of the island?
Yes.
From 6th Avenue down?
Wherever that boundary is.
In that,
Sixth and-
the 40-year is the interior, is the 40-year?
The 40-year would be
Does the
baseline.
unstabilized inlet zone jurisdictional lines change based on the most recent escarpment?
So they would look at the condition likely around 2024 when the beach was most eroded, early 2025.
So
Because
when,
they came out and collected surveys.
when they were taking all those pictures, they're gonna move the line
I imagine
to
that the
those,
base.
where
I'm
those pictures were taken. which
Trying to
is-
predict the future here, but I
Yeah.
would see them, based off of the standards that they have in their regulations, this is all based off regulations, they would put the baseline right at that escarpment line that they will have GPS data for, and then they will determine the setback line based off an erosion analysis.
So the line's potentially moving massively landward.
Especially around that corner right there where they're pretty far
Okay.
out.
My other question, when they actually start the project, the pipe comes onto the beach. Is it gonna come onto the beach at 9th and work its way down, or come onto the beach in the inlet and work its way out?
It will either come on towards the northern end, around 9th or somewhere, or more towards the center of the southern infill area. They look at a calculation on how much land pipe do they need, because they don't want to have to mobilize 8,000 feet of pipe if they can start in the middle, pump north with 4,000 feet, and then use that same pipe to pump south.
But they'll come onto the beach in one place, and then the pipe will be
They'll
on
put
the
an
beach
elbow
the whole
on.
project. It doesn't shift up and down the beach from the ocean.
They have the ability to, we call that a subline, where the subline comes onto the beach
Yeah.
from the bar area. They may move that within kind of the south end if they feel like it's more efficient for them to have multiple landings of it.
Yeah.
So that they don't have to have as much shore pipe, on the beach. I can't tell you that exact.
Thank you, I appreciate the efforts in answering these. I'm still a little confused on how the owners handle that gap.
Call me or
Okay.
email me.
Okay,
We'll work it
sounds
out.
good. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Did have a question online, I think from the, Doris Young asked, how will this project affect the drinking water on Isle Ponds? There won't be any effect to the drinking water. That all comes from CPW under the harbor and will not be impacted.
Curtis K. at 204 Ocean, and we have a rental house there. And the equipment is so noisy. And during the removing of the sandbags, it was real bad, and the whole house would shake. Is there any way that the backup sound, the beep beep, couldn't be so noisy? I mean, it just, you hear it everywhere.
If we turn it down, we're gonna get sued for gross negligence.
But
This is a problem.
is there any way it can be lowered?
The only thing that we've ever been able to see is some contractors have implemented, rather than a beep beep backup alarm, it's more of a static noise that doesn't carry as far, but is still OSHA approved. And I'm saying that out of ignorance if that's the right approval, but it has been approved. And I'm not sure if the contractor that's awarded has the ability to put those on, but we will certainly request it. They will also be doing vibration monitoring. They will set up monitors throughout the project area to kind of keep track of vibrations to the properties.
Okay. The sand fences, we built them, and they work fabulously. Much better than the plants. And so even if the city doesn't do it, I mean, I would be willing to pay for my own sand fences as long as I was allowed to put them in. Then the third question is, why don't we use all the sand that's on that island just off our coast? I mean, during the summer, everybody goes out there with their boats, and it's an island for partying. Why can't that sand be used? Is that sacred sand, or?
There's some environmental concerns over that. The environmental agencies consider shoals to be an important fish resource. From the engineering standpoint, it's something that could be done, and there's no logical reason that you, or logical is not the word. From the construction standpoint, it can be done. It's a feasible project. But the issue is you're not adding any new sand to your system. You're kind of moving it around, and you may, by dredging a new inlet channel, you are altering the inlet dynamics, and that's done in some areas for navigation purposes, but it does open up the risk of creating issues while you're having a sand surplus. And you would still have to use an ocean certified dredge because you're past the coal regs line, so it would be similar type equipment. You're likely not saving a bunch of money by doing that project. It would be a little cheaper because it's a short pump, but for the mobilization price that we have with this project and the unit cost, you really wouldn't be saving a lot of money by doing that, and you're not adding any new sand. This is adding basically money to your bank account, if we're using that analogy.
Well, I'd appreciate any help you can get with the noise.
I understand.
I mean, we had to pay people.
Yeah.
Douglas, you want the unstabilized inlet zone?
Yeah.
Orange.
Steve, is it? Yeah, it is. It's the yellow line here, and yeah, it does go to
At the 600
600
block?
Yeah.
The whole 600 block, or the 6?
Stops at 6
Okay.
and goes south.
So all the properties south of 6 are governed by different mathematical formula.
That's
to
correct.
those jurisdictions.
That's correct. Any other questions?
As I mentioned earlier, I'm with the Sea Cabins, and I wanted to find out how is this going to affect the construction of this renourishment going to affect like our pier? Is anything going to affect it, or could there be potential damage to it from the pumping of the sand through there?
Yeah, there's really no risk for construction. The equipment will not be working directly under the pier or even right up against it. We would be tapering the fill down, so probably even before we got to the actual pier limit. So all of that will be protected, and they're used to working around piers, even under piers, through a lot of nourishment projects. You've seen a lot of accretion under that pier the past year or two. And so you have a lot of sand moving from the north, which is pushing the beach out. So you're kind of, it looks like the pier may be getting shorter, or at least shallower. We'll be adding a good bit of sand to that whole system. So some of that sand may move to the north temporarily. So, that area's been gaining for years. You will likely continue to see gaining sand over time in that area, just from the natural dynamics. So that's kind of a post-project, long-term, potential change. It's no risk. It's just, more sand at the pier itself.
Okay, and I know you said it earlier, but what is the time span on this? How long are we looking at? Months?
Total project completion is about 4 months, is what we're estimating.
It starts in June.
They're intending to start in June. I would not be surprised if that pushes closer to July. They indicate that they're getting ready. They're finishing a project at Hilton Head that they've said that they do not need to finish that before they can start at least mobilizing some equipment up here. If council awards the project in April 28th, you may would start to see some boats offshore sinking the subline that connects the bar area to the beach, as early as some point in May.
And I don't know that we've said it, but the city specifically asked that they start on the north end. That is the area that's most endangered currently, so that's where we would like for them to start. I think that works for them, so I think we're expecting that they would naturally start on the north end. And so that may mean that there's nothing happening on the south end for 2 months after they actually start pumping sand. So might be later in the summer before it starts on the south end.
The contract gives a project completion date of December 31st, so they would actually have until then to complete the project. We try to give them as much flexibility as possible just to lower their risk and get a more favorable price. We don't think it will take that long, but just wanted to point that out.
Easy. Just to reemphasize then, if y'all could please take into consideration on the south end as well, the sandbags, not removing them until y'all are ready to pull the trigger, because it sounds like we could be in another hurricane season without.
It is our intention to not leave properties protected for a long duration.
And that's what it sounded like, but I know you were talking about the north end at the beginning of the conversation, and just want to emphasize we appreciate all y'all can do to keep us safe in the meantime.
Yes.
Thank you.
That is the plan.
Just a general.
Into the mic, please, Curtis.
Oh, just a general question. What happens if everybody doesn't sign?
That will be a decision point for city council to make. It's our hope that we can get 100% participation and it would not be a consideration. But in the event we can't get everybody to sign, that would have to be something city council would consider.
I think last time we got the vast majority of the easements in. I think there were certain folks that didn't sign, and there was not work completed in front of those homes last time. That's how they dealt with it. But again, Douglas is exactly right that it's going to be up to city council as to how they deal with that.
I don't think it's worth going to the mic, but my neighbor did sign last time, and I think he got a permanent easement instead of a 2-year. It freaked him out and just didn't want to sign anything. So I think if you got a call from somebody, just a little, because I don't think he's here, a little explanation, you might feel comfortable and having a problem. Just
You've talked to the
possible, I don't
permanent
know.
Yes.
I think we've been in contact with your neighbor.
Okay.
I think we did have one execute a permanent easement.
He didn't do it last time, so.
Yeah, I will say that this project's different than those past trucking projects at the south end, where those you could skip parcels very easily. With this nourishment project, you can't do that. So if there's, again, it's up to council to decide, but a single property or multiple properties, that may just create a condition where you would stop a project, at that point and just not build beyond it. There's a lot of different directions that could go, but that's not an unrealistic scenario.
Another question online, this is from Bill Skeens. When you put in plants and sand fencing, can you add "do not walk on the dune" signs? I had snowboarders during the last snow, he says. And I think we could certainly consider that. I know that individuals did that on their own. I think there were OCRM signs that are available to do that. I think Bill was also the number one, the first one in with his easement, so thank you, Bill. Any other questions? If we don't have any other questions, thank you to everyone who came. We are available in the back if you're ready to sign, and if you have follow-up questions, please reach out to us. Hopefully you have our contact. Thank you for coming. Thank you.